Good morning. You're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danie Laurel. It's the start of a new trading day. Let's kick off with our top story. Lawmakers are now looking to rush passing amendments to the Bank Secrecy Law in a bid to prevent the country from being grey-listed by the Financial Action Task Force. Anti-Money Laundering Council Executive Director George Racela said the country needs to show that the Philippines' anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing frameworks are producing good results over a sustained period. Racela made this statement after the IMF stressed the need for major reforms in the country's efforts against money laundering and counterterrorism financing. The IMF has earlier urged the Philippines to amend its bank secrecy laws to strengthen the Bangko Central's supervision powers and to boost regulations against dirty money and terrorism financing. The organization added that without major reforms by June 2021, the country could again be included in the FATF list of jurisdictions with serious deficiencies in its financial system. But here's the thing, the measure amending the bank secrecy law is not part of the LEDEC's priority list of measures for passage within the next few months. Still, House Committee on Banks and Financial Intermediaries, Juni Kua, said it's still very possible to approve the measure before 2022. Senate President Tito Soto shared this sentiment, saying they can still prioritize the measure without an endorsement from the LEDAC. Okay, guys, so this just in, literally 2 minutes ago, February overseas remittances here in the Philippines rise 5.1% year on year. The good news here is that the estimate was for a rise of 2%. So a real beat here of how our overseas Filipino workers have sent back money, much more than economists had expected, at least for the month of February. Now, the overseas remittances totaled $2.477 billion. That brings the first 2 months of remittances rising by 1.5% to $5 billion. There were approximately 5.4 million Filipinos living outside the country in 2019, according to the United Nations. Recall that remittances are around 8.1% of our GDP. Now, very quickly, kicking off as well the equities report on the vaccine front, you've got U.S. Health officials wrapped up a meeting on the possible side effects of J&J vaccine on Wednesday without a vote. So they're extending a pause on its use. A lot are watching the U.S. markets today. There's going to be jobless claims over there coming out in terms of data, industrial production, as well as retail sales. Meanwhile, you've also got in Asia, a lot of views on the People's Bank of China's cash injection today. Will the policymakers in China provide fresh liquidity? There are tightening supply concerns there in terms of liquidity, and equities over in Asia are still hovering record highs. A lot are watching out for earnings season. Now, just on that vaccine front here over in the Philippines, we have said, at least the government has said, that J&J's vaccine suspension will not affect the ongoing supply negotiations. In fact, the government has signed an agreement for the supply of 10 million Sputnik V vaccine doses as well from Russia's Gamaleya. Let's take a quick peek at the opening here of our markets. Quite down, actually, as markets, of course, are still digesting that remittance print of February, down by 0.5%, 6490.83. But of course, this comes as we did rebound yesterday amid and even as NEDA Acting Chief Carl Kendrick Chua did mention that the first quarter GDP might be near zero. We might even miss the target growth of 6.5% this year. But recall that what really lifted the sentiment yesterday was Moody's raising the bank outlook from negative back to stable. And you had yesterday financial counter as the biggest advancer that was up by 1.4% yesterday. Let's take a quick peek at how that counter is opening today, because we have quite some news on that outlook. This time from S&P. Philippine banks are likely to lend more despite that rising loan print. Recall that yesterday we had reported that the non-performing loans were at an 11-year high, and in fact, loan disbursements have been seen to recover by S&P, despite the fact fact that it has slumped for 3 straight months since December. Recall that February, we saw the biggest contraction in loan growth in 14 years. They're still saying that lending in the Philippines would likely grow by 6.5%. That is still, however, lower than the average 9.3% that we had been seeing previous to the COVID-19. Now, what are they saying? The banks in the region have a lot of liquidity because of the slowdown in loan growth, and there's a lot of deposits coming in since 2020, and they do expect a pickup in credit growth across the region. However, they mentioned banks will be remaining selective. They will be favoring the larger and higher quality borrowings only. And finally, Moody is also saying that extending the quantitative easing may pose risk to the emerging markets, particularly with the ability of the central bank to remain independent. Checking in on the biggest headlines we're keeping our eyes on, some 30 million kilos of pork possibly contaminated with African swine fever were smuggled into the country last year. This is according to Senator Kiko Pangilinan, who based his assumption on the huge discrepancy in figures from the Bureau of Customs and the Bureau of Animal Industry. This prompted senators to suspect massive corruption involving agencies other than the Agriculture Department. Pangilinan urged customs officials to keep a tighter watch on possible misdeclaration or misclassification of the pork shipments. Meanwhile, Senator Ping Lacson vowed to pursue the multi-billion peso tongpats in pork imports as well as the supposed raffle at the DA in issuing permits. Now, these topics are expected to be covered during the resumption of the Senate Committee of the Whole's inquiry into the ASF crisis, which is later today. Now, this from the Philippine Star, the House of Representatives will start discussions on Bayanihan 3 bill next week. Although the chamber is still on break, the committees on Appropriations and Economic Affairs will meet and deliberate on that bill. House leaders said the measure is expected to immediately pass the committee level. That's in time for the plenary debate when the session resumes on May 17th. This move came after Speaker Lord Alan Velasco revealed that economic managers are looking for funding sources for the 420 billion peso measure. How can the economy recover from the worst health crisis in recent history? SharePHIL says we need to reshape the economy through inclusive business, and this is the theme of this year's discussions. Here to share more about what they want to achieve, we have with us Danie Ysmael. He's the president of SharePHIL. Good morning, sir, and welcome.
Good morning, Danie. Thank you for inviting us.
Sir, let's take a step back. SharePHIL, of course, brings together our nation's most important business leaders, decision makers. What is the sentiment now across the board? Is the worst over for the economy, or are we bracing for an even more difficult year?
Well, we started the year full of confidence. A lot of businesses have already geared up for economic recovery, and that's really why our theme at for SharePHIL has been since last year. But unfortunately, given the surge that we're currently experiencing, it has set us back again, and we'll have to recalibrate our strategies moving forward. But I think the key element of this is really the restoring jobs and as well as confidence, and putting money in the pockets of our constituencies and making sure that they spend. And for that to happen, we really have to make sure that we address the health concerns. So primarily, we believe that the vaccination program is a key element of this recovery plan. So if we can accelerate the process and make people feel much more comfortable going out and spending and opening the economy up, then we believe that there's enough impetus there for the start of an economic recovery. And all the business enterprises are ready to take advantage of this, of course, in coordination with the government.
Sir, you mentioned that you need inclusive business and that the economy needs some reshaping here. Are you happy with the economic policies so far in regards to the response to the pandemic? Have we been able to be more inclusive when it comes to the recovery?
Well, it's a job by both the government and the private sector to ensure that there's inclusivity in this recovery phase. And for the government, I think it's really more reaching out to all of those marginalized Filipinos, especially those who actually lost their jobs, and making sure that not only that they get the assistance that they need during the ECQ period, but more importantly, bringing them back to work, no, with the private sector, with all of the businesses that are operating in the country. And with respect to the business enterprises, it's really a matter of making sure that all of their workers are productive, are given the chance to work, and that their programs in terms of expanding their businesses is an inclusive component, you know, making sure that they reach out to more Filipinos, more stakeholders, basically, and so that the benefits of economic growth can be spread much more widely. So that's really the essence of what we feel is necessary. And for this recovery period to really be successful, it has to be driven by all of the key by everyone, no, including especially those who are marginalized, no, and those who are really depending on day-to-day wage earners, basically, who are depending on their respective jobs to tide them through.
Sir, you were created out of a need to protect minority shareholders and retail investors and have a strong corporate governance. How do you ensure that corporate governance remains intact even as companies scramble to stay afloat? They are, of course, using the hard-earned investments of retail investors, minority shareholders to pay a lot of debt, often raising quite an amount of debt, having to finance this. How do you ensure that we are protected?
I think a lot of the businessmen, most businesses, if not all of them, have actually have actually done their share in terms of promoting, ensuring that they take care of the broader stakeholder groups, their employees, their partners, the LGUs where they operate. I think last year we see a lot of private sector involvement in making sure that they protect the economic welfare of all of their constituencies. And I think that continues as we speak, no? As the private sector has now shifted to effectively driving the vaccination program. So a lot of private sector representatives are pretty much joining forces with the government to ensure that we procure the vaccines as soon as possible and inoculate as many of the frontliners and the economic sector workers so that we can drive inclusivity and ensure that we are addressing all the needs of all of these stakeholders that we have. So beyond shareholder centrism that has been the mode in the past, a lot of companies have now shifted to stakeholder centrism or inclusivity, because that's really the way to go. For companies to thrive, they have to make sure that all of the publics which they actually affect, especially the workers and the partners, the service providers, are part of the equation, not just the shareholders. So I think that's how the private sector is responding.
People over profit as well during this period. Sir, finally, please tell us more about this April 28th event you've got here. It's entitled From Bricks to Clicks. You're expecting, if I'm not mistaken, 4,000 people. And the theme is thriving in the digital world. So what do you mean by this exactly? How did you select these speakers? And how does this differ from all of the debates that we've had in 2020 about, shifting towards digitization? At what point are we in the game? And what catalyst needs to happen here for us to be able to thrive in this new normal?
Well, SharePHIL has been all about enabling the Filipino to invest wisely, achieve financial security, and contribute to the sustainable socio-economic growth of the country. And our summit series has been a key element of a flagship event of the organization that features companies as well as personalities who have led the charge towards economic recovery, and innovation and inclusivity. Now, it has been going on for a couple of years, focusing on key issues, on key themes. But this year, we've decided to continue with our economic recovery theme, which we started last year. And all of our webinars are this event has now been, as everybody has done so, is now in webinar format. So this year, we're focusing on effectively those companies who have actually trailblazed in terms of converting their business models from bricks to what we call clicks. Those who have actually been able to transform their businesses. These are the telco companies, of course, the banks, the digital banking, and as well as e-commerce companies that have led the way towards economic recovery, which we believe will continue moving forward. And by showcasing how these companies have converted their business models, and in so doing, have actually reached more Filipinos in terms of their product offerings, and enabled small businessmen to actually thrive through the e-commerce platform. Hopefully, we can contribute towards educating the Filipino community in terms of the merits of investing and how these companies are contributing to this goal of inclusive economic recovery. So it's actually aligned with our theme for the year, which is promoting inclusive economic recovery through smart investing. And by showcasing these companies, we hope that we can generate a lot more interest into this field, and hopefully influence other companies as well to be more inclusive in the way they conduct their business.
Okay, so rare opportunity to see these leaders all in one forum. That's, of course, free for all. You can just register on the SharePHIL website. Thank you so much for those insights. That was Jaime Ysmael, President of SharePHIL.
Thank you very much, Danie.
And that's a first look into the business day. Today is Thursday, April 15, 2021. Catch Business World live for the market close. It's at 3:15 p.m. today. I'm Danie Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.